first and foremost, thank everyone for your time today. For the next 45 minutes, we're going to be talking about a product that we are very passionate about, which is Planning Analytics Assist. We've got the right folks to do so, and hopefully you leave this meeting also equally passionate, or certainly a little smarter than when you showed up. When I'm asked about this product from my customers, as cliche as it might sound, I always tell them it's really about moving from traditional planning to intelligent planning. Right? The systems that you're working with understand the content and context of your data, where the systems understand and explain the results, improve decision-making in a way that the Planning Analytics Suite from IBM hasn't seen for many, many years. So hence, we're really excited. I also tell them, don't worry, this AI is not going to take your job, but will happily do all the things that you don't want to do, like build a fifth version of a forecast template for your CFO or something like that. So equally well received. Let me give a quick intro to the team. My name is Brian Welsh. I'm a sales director here at Ironside. Previously was with IBM. I've been with Ironside for 10 years. I'm joined by Sami Sheikh, who is a product manager specifically in the PA space. And Sam is going to be doing a ton of the driving here. We're really lucky to have him. So thank you, Sami, for your time. Also joined by Rick Stevenson, who's a senior architect and an implementer of this tool. So from a services and delivery perspective, Rick's here to help with any service-related questions. So thank you all for your time. And I'll say, please, there's some Q&A questions. Keep them coming. Or let us know what you want, and as certainly at the end we'll answer questions. But as going through, if relevant, we'll have some Q&A time and want to make sure that we're answering the mail for you guys. Let me give you a little quick intro into Ironside. 25-year-old data and analytics advisory firm. Right, we've been an IBM Platinum partner for over 20 of those years. We're also a really big AWS partner, and the synergy between those two companies has really brought to bear some really nice fruit. And we're really excited about the partnerships both that IBM has as well as our expertise through both companies. A lot of happy customers across a lot of different verticals, from Fortune 5 to Fortune 5000 in like I said, all the verticals that are out there. I mentioned we're an analytics advisory firm. Look at the bottom about that's who we are, kind of what we do. Data strategy being a really big piece. It's the umbrella over everything in Ironside. So what you're looking to do with data and analytics, that strategy, whether it's regulatory related, whether there's a new ROI that's associated with something, customers that are looking to build on new verticals or acquisitions of plant companies. So how you're moving data without the organization, how you're going to better adopt that data and really strategically move that best, right? We're experts around that. The next three, business intelligence, data science, and data engineering. I'll work backwards from data engineering. This is the capturing of data in the organization. So you think of master data management, reference data management, data quality, data cleansing, really the plumbing of the organization that you have, and without which the underpinnings of that data downstream, nothing kind of matters. So a huge piece of our business is really that engineering piece and the capturing. Once you capture that data, business intelligence, business analytics, FP&A, and planning analytics is part of that, right? How you're going to democratize that data throughout your organization. So whether it's UX teams that give you a better dashboard, connecting third-party applications, migrating one tool or many tools to a single, or just really understanding that data clearly, right? We've talked about business intelligence for a long time. This new piece now, and really what the crux of today's conversation is going to be generative BI, right? How these intelligent AI tools will allow you to do those tasks better and more efficiently. And then data science. We've captured data, we've reported out on it. Now let's do something with it, right? Ironside has a stable of data scientists that we either parachute in on an existing project, or what's really more likely the case, let's ideate on some use cases that we find either through data strategy or through many of these different use cases to allow the organization to leverage that data better, right? There's never been a better time or a lower barrier of entry around data science. So we've been in that space for 15 years, and whether it's generative AI, machine learning, or just statistical analytics, there's a lot of fruit to bear there. So we're looking forward to hopefully helping our customers there. And then managed services. We do a lot of managed service for a lot of products, planning analytics being one of them. Let your smart people do smart things with their time and let us kind of manage that product. So with that, let's jump in. I'll ask Sami to show you kind of what's new in the assistant, how this fits into your existing planning environments, and why really we think it's the next major evolution of the FP&A automation thread. So keep those questions coming. There's a Q&A box in the bottom. Enter it. We'll catalog those. Certainly ask them at the end of the webinar. And if there's something that is relevant while Sami's doing it, we will kind of interrupt him and take it from there. So with that, Sami, why don't I turn it over to you, sir?
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you, Brian, Rick, and the Ironside team for the time today. I've got a ton of content to cover, so yeah, please lean heavily into the chat. We'll try to leave space throughout the presentation to answer questions, but I'm going to be touching heavily on the generative and the agentic aspect of our kind of in-market deliverables and our roadmap for planning analytics. And just to give you a lay of the land, there's going to be a few slides, and then I'm going to lean heavily into the demo side of the house. I'm going to be doing live demos off of my development environments, so wish me luck. But I wanted to show you some stuff that was both in market and some of the stuff that was coming as well. And at a high level, it all starts with planning analytics, right? Our vision still is to enable organizations to drive future-ready business performance with an integrated, easy to manage, and extensible planning and analytics application anywhere. And that statement is great, but I try to break it down into 4 or 5 pillars that actually derive the value for me and the way that I explain it. And there's 4 pillars that I want to touch on that really drive the value of planning analytics. Number 1 is our reporting interfaces, whether you're talking Excel, our investments in Excel, or our investments in a web interface being Planning Analytics Workspace. There's also our TM1 engine, which is the best in class, best in market for enterprise level scalability in the planning space. And from there, there's the deployment strategy. Our deployment strategy is really to be where you need us to be. Where some of our competitors, for example, focus heavily, especially when it comes to AI, focus heavily in one aspect over the other, whether it's cloud, hyperscaler focused, managed cloud focused, hosted cloud focused, and less so on the on-premise side. And a subset of each, we try to deliver everything that's valuable in planning analytics across all of our offerings. And I'll touch on that later in the presentation. And then finally, it's purpose built for your context. So it's planning analytics. While it lives heavily in the financial space, we do have use cases that cross HR, IT, marketing, sales, finance, etc. And the last pillar that I try to drive on is really about our delivery cadence. And I truly believe this is a value add. There are roughly 12 months, there's 12 months in the year. We release roughly 10 out of those 12 months. We have new releases that include bug fixes, feature updates, conformance updates, and more. And we're really proud of that, especially while enterprise planning has been around for a while. The rate at which it's moving forward with kind of the advent of AI, whether generative, agentic, machine learning, predictive, etc., really necessitates us to be on the cutting edge. And I hope you'll see that as I show you some of the things we've delivered for the Planning Analytics Assistant and some of the things that are coming. And if you look at our priorities for 2025, there's 3 main pillars. On the left-hand side is service modernization. And so that is really about making the backend and the infrastructure of planning analytics as robust, flexible, and available as possible. So whether that's improvements to our services to make them more scalable, improvements to our data source connectivity to allow connect to additional data sources that are used by our customers, expansions of our planning analytics as a service offering across additional data centers and hyperscalers, and even investments in our API and our APIs. And then on the right-hand side of the screen is business owned. So where the left-hand side of the screen around service modernization is really about making the backend and infrastructure as robust and flexible as possible. The right-hand side of the screen is really about making those interfaces as intuitive as possible, making it easier, regardless of where you are on the spectrum of your capabilities within planning analytics, that you're able to leverage the value of planning analytics and have a decreased time to value in that process. So that's investments in our UIs and in our functionality that feeds those UIs. The thing that's connecting A and B across this slide is insights with AI, and it's really about AI. We're trying to leverage AI to capitalize on the investments we make in the back end and make them as easy to interact with and utilize on the front end as well. And you'll see that in my demos as we go forward. And in terms of AI, even if you're looking at generative or agentic, the key here is not the percentages. The key here is the value that we get to unlock. As Brian said so eloquently, it's really about moving from traditional planning to intelligent planning. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to leverage both to make planning as intuitive and as easy as possible without sacrificing governance or accuracy, which is kind of the bread and butter of our offerings at IBM. And whether you're looking at agentic AI, which we'll touch about in the second half of the presentation, or even generative AI, our customers across the spectrum are looking to leverage these technologies across their use cases internally to be able to kind of increase productivity across the board. And so with that in mind, about a year ago, we introduced the Planning Analytics Assistant. And I'm just gonna, there's 3 slides here before I kick off into my first demo. I'm just gonna talk about how we got to this offering that is the Planning Analytics Assistant. At a high level, we wanted to marry the best of both worlds. Planning analytics and its ability to do things like reduce your forecasting effort, improve your operational performance, etc., and marry that with the power of watsonx. watsonx being an AI platform that's open, trusted, built on governance, targeted from a use case standpoint, and empowering from a customizability standpoint. And that led to a few conversations that I'll highlight very briefly before I show you a demo of some of the features that we have in market. Number one is we wanted to understand how we wanted to deliver this offering. This was about a year ago, and we wanted a simple, elegant, and secure approach to connectivity. So we went with a managed approach to connectivity. The idea being is that as long as you have a browser and the appropriate entitlements to Planning Analytics and the Planning Analytics Assistant license, then and that browser can communicate to your instance of Planning Analytics and our own instance of watsonx in the cloud, that's IBM's own instance of watsonx in the cloud, then you will have access to everything that I'm going to show you today that's in market and would be part of the PA Assistant generative AI roadmap. Now, this is really important for a couple of reasons. Obviously, first is the little overhead. We did not want to burden our customers with having to own and manage everything, just to leverage generative AI for what generative AI is generally good at doing with structured data and planning analytics. And you'll see that in the next slide. But in addition to that, this paradigm that you see here, where it's just the browser and the entitlements connecting to our instance of watsonx, is not just available to our cloud customers, it's also available to our local customers as well. There is a handshake that's involved to enable your environment to communicate to our own instance of watsonx in the cloud. But this paradigm is very much applicable to our local customers in addition to our cloud customers, whether planning analytics on cloud or planning analytics as a service on AWS or Azure. And as I said, from there, we wanted to discuss, okay, so then how we're delivering it is one thing, and why we're delivering it is another, but then who is this thing for? Who is the Planning Analytics Assistant for? And it really goes back to 3 main themes. And like I said in the previous slide, the goal is to allow our users to leverage generative AI for what generative AI is generally good at doing with structured data and planning analytics. So that's ease of use, explainability, and content to data manipulation are the high-level themes of our roadmap for the Planning Analytics Assistant. Generative AI is good at doing those things. Help me find things, help me explain things, help me create things. That's generative AI is really good at those attributes. And so who we're delivering these things for is really across the ends of the spectrum. You'll see a lot of analyst related features to start for this year, but as we delve into the next year and beyond, we want to deliver more modular heavy and administrative focused, and even extend this into planning analytics for Excel and other areas of the product. So let's go ahead and kick off into our first demo here. So you should be seeing here it's a very simple dashboard that I put together just to show off some of the generative AI capabilities that exist within Planning Analytics. And when you do have the Planning Analytics Assistant enabled, you're going to see it in a couple of different ways. There's 2 ways to basically access the assistant. There's the chat icon here that will populate the assistant and it'll pop out as a panel here on the right hand side that you can use to do things like kick off the generative features, as well as do things that are inherent to planning analytics, whether it's creating a calculation on a cube or switching to a line chart or creating a sandbox, etc. It's a combination of those 2 things. And then in addition to that, we do have an AI operations button here that you can see here. And depending on the context, you'll get access to certain features. And the reason that we did this is we wanted to make sure that we met our accessibility guidelines by offering both of these capabilities for the Planning Analytics Assistant. And so I'm going to show you a few features as it relates to this diagram that we see here across ease of use, explainability, and content to data manipulation, just to give you an idea of some of the things that are in market. And then I'll pivot to the agentic side, show you a demo of that, and then we'll talk about the roadmap and where this is all going. So simply kicking off this chat assistant pulls the chat assistant out. This is our managed generative AI chat assistant, the Planning Analytics Assistant. And you are populated with a few kind of suggestion pills to start, but you can also use it, like I said, to kick off the generative AI features in the product. So we'll start off with an ease of use feature, one of the first features that we put together, which is Chart Insights. And the idea with Chart Insights is it should be able to tell me about any sort of interesting trends or insights from this data. So if I say something like, tell me about this chart, with that chart selected, we'll kick off the first flow in this demo, which is Chart Insights. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see your chart in all its glory, alongside the legend if the legend is enabled. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you see a few things. So you see a natural language summary, this is a long form summary that kind of walks you through an introduction, an analysis, and even a conclusion at that point. You can cycle between the chart series using this drop down here, and it tries to map it back to the legend on the left-hand side. And of course, generative AI is also good at language, right? Because it's built on large language models. So you can always regenerate any of our outputs for language, and it'll take the exact same query and regenerate based on language, based on what the model was trained on. You can, of course, always also copy any of our texts and bring them into your canvas as static widgets for further editing and saving from there. And we also offer this as in a key point for summary, or what I call the meat and potatoes. And the reason I want to show you this is not just to show you the two forms that we offer, but to talk a little bit about data privacy. Okay, and this is a very important part of this conversation. Our customers want to know, what are you doing with our data, and where's it going, how is it being managed, et cetera, and should I be worried? And so let me walk you through what happens with the data using the example that you're seeing here. First things first, it's important to note that we do not rely on generative AI or the large language models to do the complete analysis for us. We're very fortunate with TM1, with Planning Analytics, that we have access to TM1. Like I said earlier, the best calculation engine in the planning market. And so we lean heavily on TM1 to extract the appropriate metadata, things like these, descriptive statistics, for example. We wrap that in a query that gets sent to the appropriate large language model, and every single feature that I'm about to show you in the generative AI space has an AI icon that calls a little bit about the feature, how it works, and the large language model that was used. We use exclusively IBM Granite Foundation models, which are not trained on any customer data, but even we are very careful on the data that gets sent over. So like I said, we lean on TM1 to basically extract this metadata, wrap that in a query that gets sent to the appropriate large language model here, watsonx Granite Foundation large language model. And once the output is generated, as you see here with this output, the traces are removed from the watsonx side. So your raw data largely never leaves TM1, and our models are not trained on any of your data. We have our own data that we train those models on, that's been blessed by IBM in the process. So I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that in terms of how data privacy works with the Planning Analytics Assistant managed experience. Moving on from there, we'll touch a little bit on ease of use and explainability. So we'll cross these a little bit. And I'll talk to you a little bit about forecast insights, which we delivered very recently, actually. And the idea with forecast insights, if you're not aware, Planning Analytics offers on-demand forecasting in both multivariate and univariate. But if I was to pull out a univariate forecast starting in the last release, or even a multivariate forecast with the most recent release, and I kick off a preview, what it's going to do is now you're going to be presented with a new screen, a more modern looking screen that combines both predictive and generative AI all in one space. And what it's going to do is it's going to basically render the chart on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, it's going to show you a generative analysis. You'll have to forgive me. This is a development environment, but I think I can make it work for us. But the idea here is that as you kick off a univariate forecast preview, then what you're going to get is this sort of generative meets predictive experience, right? On the left-hand side, I still have access to my entire forecasted chart alongside all my statistical details. You can, of course, download all of this as CSV for further analysis, but we want to produce some of the analysis right here. And we were getting a lot of feedback that, for example, the majority of our customers, especially the more intermediate or casual users, don't know what a lot of these error measures really mean for them, right? Or exactly what they should be extracting from these forecasted values, right? And whether or outliers that might exist. And so we produce a natural language summary, again, leaning on watsonx Granite Foundation models. And it has, like I said, each feature has this AI card. So if you are curious about how it works or where that data is being used, you have that information by your side. And we populate a overview about the forecast, and then we dive deeper into the model details. These are these statistical measures to explain them in a little bit more detail. If outliers are identified, they'll appear in this tab here, and we highlight information about the outliers that are present here, and any sort of patterns or recommendations we can make on the forecast as we go forward. Again, this is our first foray into combining generative alongside predictive. And we find that as we add more and more features in the generative space and tie it to other features and AI that exist in planning analytics, we're creating very unique flows that require very minimal clicks and very minimal knowledge of planning analytics to get the value out of the system and the software. And then from there, if we go back here and we go back into explainability, so we crossed ease of use and explainability. Let me show you one of my favorite features that's really about explainability. It's called explain cell. And the idea of explain cell is to use generative AI to explain cell intersections. If I'm looking at this cube view, for example, and I'm on this intersection, it's apparent to even the most casual user that this is an intersection of payroll and June. So this is likely a consolidation of the payroll input that happened for June. But if you get into a meteor crosstab, something like this that has a mixture of values, consolidations, percentages, calculations, trend indicators, status icons, you might be a little bit interested into a particular cell as to why this value, how this value came about. For example, this is a pretty large value compared to the rest. So I would right click on that cell. And when I right click on the cell, I now have access to this feature called explain cell. And explain cell, the vision for explain cell, right, is a where did this value come from type of feature. On the left-hand side, you have access to the lineage of your data in terms of where that came from and everything that led to that output. And then we work to explain every single level of that output where possible. So for example, for this calculation here, we're actually able to tease out the syntax of the calculation and actually explain it, this model logic in casual and natural language, more in business speak for users across the spectrum to be able to understand how this calculation works. And then with a summary in terms of what they can learn from that calculation in terms of how it's used. We also identify additional documentation that's available in our documentation based on the output that could help explain either kind of context or terminology that's specific to the planning or to the planning space or to planning analytics specifically. You can, of course, regenerate and copy any of these summaries. And you can even enter it directly as a cell comment directly within the cell. So you can have a timestamp version of it if you so choose. And this feature is really, I'm touching a little bit on the roadmap here, but the next step in this feature is really about the transaction log. So right now it supports things like consolidations and model logic. If this is an input, if there's an input to a cell, I also want to be able to tell our users the last several changes that happened to it, what those changes were, who made those changes, so that if I was working with Brian, for example, and I was doing some funny business at the leaf level, he should be able to use a feature like this to explain where that value came from, who inputted it, and so all in one-stop shop with a user experience like this, so he can chase me down and I can explain to him where that value came from if I didn't leave the appropriate commentary in the process. And that's a little bit about explainability with planning analytics. The last category here that I want to touch on is content and data manipulation. Many of our users, for example, are not necessarily aware of where the data is that they need to kind of use for their role, whether they're an analyst or a contributor or otherwise. But they for sure know the questions that they're trying to get answered. And so we wanted to help kind of bridge that gap. A few releases ago, we introduced the first release or the first MVP of a feature called the Data Explorer. And the whole purpose of the Data Explorer is to help you find your data tables. So if I say something like explore my data, which kicks off this Data Explorer features, or I could kick it off directly from this AI icon. The idea here is that it's going to ask me what I'm looking for. And so if I say, show me, let's say, channel revenue for 2021. Then it's going to ask me which database I'm looking into. For the first release, you will need to know which database that question is in, but you don't necessarily need to know the cube. And there is a flow where in the modeling workbench, you can basically add descriptive tags to cubes that you've selected within a database that would feed features like this and other features that rely on this kind of methodology as we move forward. But simply selecting the database in question, like I said, I don't need to select the cube from which that data came from. And one of the things I love about this feature is the views don't even necessarily need to be created prior to this this kickoff that I just did. They can be created ad hoc, and the data can be stitched together based on the cubes that have been analyzed in the modeling workbench with generative AI to create those descriptive tags. When the cube is rendered, you're going to see a few things. At the top, you're going to see a little breadcrumb in terms of where that came from alongside the query and additional cubes within that database that could have answered that question as well. And you can populate up to 3 here that you can cycle between for further analysis. Then you see the then what you see here is a sort of semi-interactive cube viewer. The cube viewer, you don't have all of the bells and whistles that you have in the cube viewer that you have once it's in the canvas, but you can still make, if these are kind of leaf level changes, I can still make changes here, and I can even change the context as you see here in terms of years and month, quarter, year, et cetera, and so on and so forth. And at the bottom is a natural language summary that's really important because it calls out a few things. It calls out how it got to that view, right, based on the query that I inputted. It shows me what it matched against based on what I specified, and it showed me based on what I omitted or or things that I specified that did not exist in the data, what it ended up defaulting to. This is so you have this information in your tool set. If you wanted to ask your question in a different way or wanted to understand how it got to that view in the first place, you have access to that as you go forward. And the idea is that once you're ready, you basically have access to this to bring this directly into your canvas. And I can do a whole host of things. I can go ahead and kick off an explain cell if I'm interested. I can switch it to a chart using the assistant if I wanted to, and then I can go ahead and kick off the chart insights in there. Like if I say, tell me about this chart, and then it will kick off the chart insights from there. And that's one of the things that we're finding more and more with this generative AI, as I was saying, is that as we start to add features in the generative space, we're starting to get really unique flows that don't really require a lot of know-how in planning analytics to leverage what planning analytics can do for you. And whether you're trying to find your data or understand what's happening behind a chart, we offer features and capabilities that'll let you do that with the Planning Analytics Assistant. And so from there, that's a little bit about the Planning Analytics Assistant and what's available in market today. But let's go ahead and talk about the agentic side of the Planning Analytics Assistant. So a couple of releases ago, we released the integration between the Planning Analytics and Planning Analytics Assistant with watsonx Orchestrate. Now, watsonx Orchestrate is an agentic platform that's built for creating kind of agentic flows. And agentic flows at a high level, the best way that I've kind of had it explained to me, and so I'll share that with you, is agentic flows at a higher level are really important when you have multiple applications and data sources that are being leveraged by those applications, and you want to unify that experience or those flows all within one unified chat experience. So you're leveraging multiple applications, multiple data sources, and leveraging generative AI in the process to help kind of stitch everything together in a way that makes sense for the user. And whether you're trying to enhance your predictive forecasting with additional large language models, or whether you're trying to orchestrate or automate steps, like we have clients that are using Orchestrate alongside Planning Analytics to be able to do things like automate month-end close, for example, or we have we recently released our allocation agent that I'll touch on as well, which is being used by our own finance team for to minimize the kind of the burden on budget allocations. Or if you want to even improve the implementation flexibility of the PA assistant, that's really kind of where the Orchestrate and the agentic experience comes into play. Like I said prior, is that with the managed experience that you saw several slides ago, you can still leverage that with Planning Analytics local or on Cloud Pak for data. But it's not an air-gapped approach. And if you're in a regulatory environment or you have policies that are very strict where you need to own and bring everything down, then we want to let you enable that too. And we actually just released the ability to leverage Planning Analytics and Planning Analytics Assistant in an air-gapped capability with watsonx Orchestrate. So if you have PA Local, for example, and you want to bring in watsonx Orchestrate on Software Hub and leverage kind of a watsonx.ai in the process, and leverage the Planning Analytics Assistant locally as well in an air-gapped approach, you can do that with the agentic experience. But the question that I usually get at this point is, all right, so you're confusing me a little bit, Sammy. what's the licensing for this thing? Like, so am I going to need a certain number of licenses for the agentic side and a certain number of licenses for the generative side? How does this work when it comes to the Planning Analytics Assistant? So the Planning Analytics Assistant, we try to be very, very clear and very kind of intuitive with our licensing approach. So first of all, it's based on user licenses, so you don't have to worry when it comes to the Planning Analytics Assistant, especially in the managed capability that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. You're going to be able to see the generative capabilities of the Planning Analytics Assistant. But for the same $30 per user per month, you have access to the agentic approach that kind of goes beyond what we were saying earlier. So let me show you a quick demo before I kind of dive deeper into the slide in terms of how some of these things can really further empower what you're already doing in planning analytics.
Yeah, and Sammy, the first question we got was how much does the assistant cost? So nice segue. I guess someone's ears were ringing there. So
That's perfect. That's perfect. So let me show you the demo, Brian, and then I'll pop right into the licensing piece because I want to show the difference between what you saw in demo one, which is the pure managed experience. We deliver the features, you leverage them, to something that's a little bit more customizable with the Planning Analytics Assistant and watsonx Orchestrate. So here, you should be seeing my browser here that's kind of showing a proof of concept of an HR agent. And this proof of concept, the whole point is to show how planning analytics can work alongside watsonx Orchestrate in an HR contract. So you would be leveraging planning analytics data alongside HR data in an HR portal and HR software to one degree or another. And the first thing I want you to notice is that I'm not in planning analytics. So it goes back to our ease of use, our investments into ease of use. This is a whole new brand of ease of use. If you wanted to leverage this within planning analytics, so if you wanted to be here in planning analytics and replace our managed assistant with your own agent or with prepackaged agents that we build, you can do that where you can keep everybody in planning analytics and still leverage these capabilities that I'm about to show. But if you want your users to leverage planning analytics outside of planning analytics, if you get complaints that, hey, planning analytics, it's not intuitive to me, or I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z, and you want to embed something like this into your customer portal, for example, or into your internal portal, you have the ability to do that with watsonx Orchestrate, and you would be able to leverage planning analytics data and features in the process using the appropriate planning analytics agents and prepackaged tools. So in this agent, for example, we're going to be going through an HR analyst flow. And the whole point of this flow is to understand what our priorities are and then action them from there. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so we can read along as we kind of go forward. And there's two main priorities that we're going to action really quickly. Number one is to identify and reward our top sellers, so the top 10% of sellers based on quota attainment with a 15% base salary increase. And then in addition to that is to identify the employment gaps on the sales team and then create the appropriate job requisitions from there for further review. And I'm going to start off with the first one. I could type these out, but the agentic experience can also help suggest things for you as you kind of go through your flow. And I'm going to ask that you show me the top 10% of sellers by attainment. So now we're leveraging planning analytics data, right? And we're bringing in planning analytics data. And what that's doing is not only bringing in the planning analytics data and showcasing it in watsonx Orchestrate, in the watsonx Orchestrate chat. But in addition to that, it's also manipulating the data. I pulled in the data, it filtered on the top 10% and sorted it based on quota attainment. Again, I did not need to be in planning analytics to leverage this. And then from there, I can actually use the appropriate agents and tools to basically simulate the increase. And what that's going to do with the simulation increase is now we're leaning not only on the data and planning analytics, but the features of planning analytics. So this is leveraging the sandboxing capability that's available in planning analytics that's really kind of focused on what if scenarios like this. And once I have a look here, I can either commit or I can discard this. And if I commit this, you can actually leverage tools and agents to be able to not only commit it back to planning analytics, but also show you where that happened in planning analytics if you so choose. Now, I don't know if I've been timed out, but I'm hoping that it renders perfect. And the idea here is that this is fully functioning planning analytics. Wherever you need it, you have access to it. And that's just to show you that with the changes that were made in the process upon the committing of the within the chat. And then from there, I can actually go into the second part of my flow, which is, okay, so then give me the expected number of sellers, and basically, are there any gaps? And this is leveraging both information that's probably coming from an HR system in terms of the gaps, et cetera, and the names, alongside the data that's coming in, seller data that's coming in from Planning Analytics. And what it does is it shows you a breakdown, right? This is another table that shows you a breakdown in terms of what the expected seller number of sellers are, the current count, and sort of differences, with positive differences being a gap, negative differences being a surplus, and a small natural language statement that kind of makes sure that you understand what you're seeing in the table. And then once I'm comfortable with that, I can basically go ahead and start the job requisition piece based on those locations. And what it's going to do here is it's going to create the drafts and push them to the appropriate system for further review. Now that's where this demo stops, but it could have kept going, keeping everything within this space, depending on how much you want. But I wanted to stop here in the demo just to show you that it doesn't also have to be all within this space. If you're comfortable with certain sections of your flows living in those applications, we want to let you leverage those too as well. So if we go back here to Brian's point, if you want everything on the left-hand side of this chart, so everything I showed in demo 1, it's a managed experience, low overhead. We'll basically deliver the features, and you can leverage them. Or if you want the agentic capabilities with the Planning Analytics data, and even leveraging Planning Analytics Assistant capabilities like our generative AI tools, it's all, from a Planning Analytics Assistant standpoint, it's all the same license. It's $30 per user per month. And actually, within the Planning Analytics administration page, you'll be able to actually swap between the two, whether you want the managed experience or the customer managed agentic experience. So we didn't want to muddy the waters from a Planning Analytics Assistant standpoint. It's not based on monthly active users for us. It's based on just on number of users, and it's a minimum 5 users to start. You don't need to arm your entire workforce with the Planning Analytics Assistant. But for that same $30 per user per month, you could leverage either or. Now, I will say that if you are leveraging the agentic experience that you see on the right-hand side, it is a customer managed experience, because that's where the customizability comes from, right? The part of the advantage or disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, with the first section here, is that it's not customizable. Because it's our own managed experience, we deliver features that are applicable to as many customers as possible. But each customer is unique in terms of what features they want to use and how they want to leverage it, and even the domain knowledge that they want to bring into that space, whether you want to kind of bring in your own domain knowledge into the agentic flow when you're asking questions about your data. And so the second part here does require watsonx Orchestrate licenses that are sold separately. But from a Planning Analytics Assistant standpoint, if you want to leverage everything that's available in side A, in side B, you can still leverage that for the same $30 per user per month. Now let's talk about the roadmap a little bit. And this is basically an advertisement from our legal department that says what can change might change. But let me show you some of the things that we're working on in the process. Before I go into the individual pieces, let's talk about the strategy. And there's really 3 pillars I want to talk about when it comes to our strategy with generative and agentic AI. Pillar 1 is the managed experience, right? And that's everything that I showed in the first demo. We deliver the features, low overhead, and we have a very robust roadmap. And I'm going to highlight some of the things that are coming in the near term for that as well. And we have investments in that area. The second pillar is the agentic experience that we launched roughly 2 releases ago. And the agentic experience, like I said, is about the customizability of AI. Bring in your own domain knowledge, leverage AI, agentic AI alongside generative AI for your own use cases, whether using prepackaged agents or whether using custom tools. For the first couple of releases, since this is really fresh for us, a lot of it is bespoke as it is right now. So it would require a lot of custom development on the custom tools and custom agents with watsonx Orchestrate. But that's where pillar 3 comes in. With pillar 3, we want to be able to deliver prepackaged agents and tools that you're going to be able to leverage with watsonx Orchestrate, for example, to be able to create your own custom agents or be able to utilize our own prepackaged agents in a more out-of-the-box capability or capacity when it comes to the agentic experience. So pillar 1 is the managed experience. Pillar 2 is the customer managed agentic experience. And pillar 3 is about the prepackaged tools and agents that are going to leverage things from pillar 1 and pillar 2 in the process, but make them more intuitive for our customers to use. And some of the things that are coming with planning analytics. So this is one of my favorite features. I've been waiting for this for about a year, and it's variance analysis. And so I'm going to show you what this looks like in product. But at a high level, variance analysis is really about understanding your what happened, right? At a high level, it's your new minus old calculation. It's your actuals minus your budgets at a high level. But if I gave you 6 paragraphs on actual minus budget, like I showed you with chart insights, probably not the most interesting or most interesting or most impacting thing that I can give to you when it comes to analyzing insights on variance, right? So we're focusing on driver-based variance to start. So where you have, so if you have a budget, for example, calculation that's being fed by a calculation like price times quantity, we want to be able to help you identify those drivers and then create an analysis that's based on those drivers. So not just how well you underachieved or overachieved, but where does that variation the strongest and where should you be looking to as you go forward in your strategy? I'm going to show you a proof of concept of this as it hasn't been released yet, but let me go and see if I can do this for you live. So here, what you're going to see here on the left-hand side is a cube viewer that shows kind of my budgets and my actuals. It starts off with a very similar flow to explain cell, where if I'm clicking, I click my appropriate budget, I can click 2 budgets, for example, and analyze it, or I can click my budget and actual and a control click, and I right click my versions, and then I have access to this feature called variance analysis. And then what you're going to see for the first release is a kind of a flow that walks you through. It's a 3-step flow that ends with the 3rd step being the analysis. This is just to make sure that we don't sacrifice governance and accuracy in the process by leveraging AI to do everything for us. Everybody's familiar with the way hallucinations work with generative AI. And so we limit that as much as possible by leaning into TM1 and making sure that the user is involved where needed explicitly as we get into the analysis. As we move forward, release over release, you're going to start to see this become more and more automated. But for the first release to start, it requires a bit of data scope selections. So for example, it's going to ask me for my versions here. Since I clicked my actuals first and my budget last, it swapped them on me. But I can very easily swap these so that my baseline version is my budget and my alternative version that I'm looking to analyze variance on is my actuals. It automatically populates the cube from which that data view was implemented. But if the drivers of variation come from a different cube, you can basically specify that here with this dropdown. And then if you do have a threshold percentage where you have a certain level of variation that you're comfortable with, whether positive or negative, we want you to be able to specify that here so that we can highlight it in the analysis as well. But from there, the second step is to choose the drivers. And we support 2 drivers to start, looking to expand it as we go across releases. But very simply here, I'm going to select the members that represent my drivers, and notice that as I click one cube here, it automatically gets selected here for us for simplicity. And I'm going to go ahead and say my unit net sales price is my driver 1, and my units here are my driver 2. And this is just to make sure that we're mapping back the appropriate drivers to the analysis. And like I said, as we move forward, release over release, you're going to see this start to be more automated for us. Now, if the drivers were in a different cube, you're going to be able to leverage the context filters here and make the context changes as you see fit. But once you have your selections made, then the analysis comes into fruition. And the analysis is made up of a couple parts. First of all is the overall analysis, right? In terms of overall, where is your variation the highest? Whether it's your driver 1 being at your unit sales price variation, where I see 5G, 84 gig has a highly positive variation here, or in the units being here, where I have very negative variation here for the units that I might want to look into, for example, just to have it so you have it top 3, bottom 3 in your view at all times from a table standpoint. And then, of course, we highlight the key findings and trends and insights that you might want to extract from here as well. In addition to that, we even offer potential prescriptions as to some things that you could look into to either keep the profitability going if the variation is working for you, or things that you might want to try depending on how negative the variation was, or how much the variation moved away from your budgets. And then from there, once you're interested, for example, it'll call out for example, 5G 32 gigabytes experience the most significant negative variation. So I might want to dig into that. So that's where I go into my member analysis, and I see that 5G 32 gigabyte is already selected for me. And from there, it highlights the variation in terms of what that variation is, any sort of trends in the variation, and the overall effect. This is so you can understand exactly how much variation was driven by that exact member and any sort of additional information that we can pull from the data. If you're still curious about your selections that were made alongside the way, we do offer this kind of screen that allows you to understand where those selections are made from. And one thing I do want to highlight is because I know like you might be worried that your users might choose the wrong drivers in the process, for example. And if the wrong drivers are chosen, then the variance won't add up. That's part of why we went towards a driver-based variance approach. So if I go ahead and I populate this, it'll try to populate a variance analysis for me, but it'll also highlight where the variation doesn't add up. And if the variation doesn't add up, then you have a much bigger problem than the analysis itself. That means that the drivers aren't being mapped back to the overall variation that exists between your budgets and your actuals in this case. And we're really excited to have this feature come out, variance analysis, and this is actually slated for the next release of Planning Analytics this year. In addition to that, I also talked about this briefly around explain cell. That's where I did the explanation of where a value came from, whether it was a calculation, consolidation, or model logic. I said that the next step is for us to do the transaction log, so that if there is inputs, we want to be able to explain the last several changes that were made, who made them, and what those changes were, in case you were chasing that down and it was an input. That's actually slated for this year as well, but could dip into Q1 of next year. And then in addition to that, we do offer other features like outlier analysis. Outlier analysis is a feature that we have within Planning Analytics Assistant that's available today. And if I can find my, yeah, there. It's available today within this space, but the first release was largely focused on identifying the outliers in question. So if I kicked off the outlier analysis, you're going to see a chart that calls out the outliers and a natural language summary that calls out the outliers in question. You can view this as a line chart or a scatter chart, and of course you have your handy dandy AI card in the process. You can correct for the outlier if you so choose, and it'll re-render the chart as well as the analysis to show you what those changes were made. And then we offer 7 algorithms out of the box. Some of them show up depending on the number of data points and type of time series. And while this was the first release of outlier analysis that you saw, we did get a lot of feedback, and you'll notice that our roadmap for AI isn't just new features, it's also a phased approach for existing features. We want them to be as crisp and as clean, as intuitive as possible. So the next step based on feedback was to bring in the Cube Viewer forward into the experience in a conditionally formatted way. So the idea being is that instead of having you just show the chart and then cycling through the chart series to find your outliers, let us populate those outliers for you within a cube viewer style mentality directly from the cube view that was being initiated for this feature. And then from there, you can make your selections from there. This is phase 2 of outlier analysis. Phase 3 in the medium term is a bring your own outlier criteria, so that you can say, hey, Sammy, these algorithms are great, but anything greater than 5% period over period is an outlier for us, or anything greater than X% rolling 3 months is an outlier, or anything greater than Y value, for example, is an outlier to us, to make it a little bit more customizable.
Hey, Sammy, we might have a roadmap follow-up question. I think it would be
Yes,
in the
sir.
roadmap. Are there any admin or modeler features being planned in the roadmap? I don't know if that's relevant to where you're at now or if that's been covered at all, but that was put in a little earlier.
No, absolutely. So I kind of highlighted on the at the beginning of the call, there is a lot of the features for the first year have been focused more on the consumers and the contributors and the analysts. We are working towards more modular related features. One of the ones that is my favorite going in, so I'll just kind of go back here just so I can show you what we're talking about. So if I go back into the explain cell piece here, explain cell for a calculation, actually, while this kind of presents itself as an analyst or a consumer friendly feature, the bedrock of this, or the foundation of this, is what's going to start feeding some of the features that we want to deliver next year around TI processes, for example. Our ability to kind of tease out the model logic in syntax and explain it in natural language is the foundation for features that we want to deliver next year around summarize TI process and then generate TI processes, as well as the ability to analyze and optimize feeders and rules. So these are the things you're going to start hearing us talk more about in 2026. But some of the features that we've already implemented this year represent the foundation for what we're looking to deliver in that space next year. I hope that helps. But if we get back here, for example, so we are looking at introducing updates to the outlier analysis feature. And then if you look at the pillar 3 from a few slides ago, it's really about the prepackaged AI agents and tools. So we actually just released our first prepackaged agent, which is the allocation agent, which is focused on budget planning. So the idea being is a financial analyst would be able to kind of view usually in a repeated mentality, capacity, they view the budget allocations, they review them, they make adjustments, approve them, and then go on from there. Having that be in an agentic experience where it's all kind of in one agent flow, where similar to this you saw with the HR experience, the financial analyst basically invoke the agent to view the allocations. Then if they like the allocations, then they can approve them. If not, they can adjust the spreadings and then repeat the process from there. And this is part of what agentic AI is really good at, is automating discrete labor tasks. As I said earlier, we have one of our customers, for example, that's also automated, use this flow to automate a month close, where they choose the appropriate business unit, and then the month close gets automated from there with the appropriate logs and information and insights extracted in the process. And then we have additional prepackaged agents and tools that we want to be able to deliver in addition to the allocation agent. An update model agent, so that if you upload data through the watsonx Orchestrate chat, like an Excel file, you can actually ingest that within Planning Analytics. And then in addition to that, you have your scenario planning tools and agents to be able to kind of, similar to the allocation agent, but more robust, not just for allocations, but more for end-to-end scenario planning. We also have forecasting agents and agent tools that are going to let you leverage forecasting in the process as well. And actually, you're able to do that in this flow here as well with the allocation agent, with the HR analysis. It was part of this flow as well. And then finally, we have two things here: additional domain-specific agents across finance, supply chain, HR for planning specific purposes that you'll hear us talk more about next year, as well as generative AI agent tools. So these generative AI agent tools are going to let you leverage everything that I showed you in the first demo and the generative AI explain cell chart insights, etc., directly within the agentic experience in a very easy capacity, leveraging those tools as you create your own custom agents, or you kind of customize the prepackaged agents that we deliver. And those tools are, of course, MCP tools. I just want to make it clear, those tools that we are delivering are based on a technology called MCP, or Model Context Protocol, that's being called, quote unquote, the USB-C of AI connectivity in the agentic space. And it'll be the USB-C of AI connectivity with Planning Analytics. And these agentic tools will basically enable any MCP compatible client, like, for example, an Anthropic desktop or VS Code, to create agents combining our tools with your own custom tools or other tools in the process. So basically, we want to be able to deliver these tools, their standardized connectivity, and within a platform like watsonx Orchestrate, you can mix and match them how you see fit. And then this is my last slide here, which is basically around some of the things that we've delivered this year and as we wrap up this year. If you look at the fourth quarter of this year, you're looking at multivariate forecast insights that we just delivered. That's the addition to univariate forecast insights, which I showed. Then there's the driver-based variance analysis, which I showed as well. That's being delivered in the next release. We have our first phase for MCP tools that, as I showed previously here. And these tools will let you do things like execute workloads, cancel TM1 processes, etc. Just a foundational set of tools that we're looking to build on as we move forward. We introduced the air gap support earlier in this quarter as well. So like I said, if you wanted a true air gap support for the agentic experience with Planning Analytics Assistant, you can do that. Obviously, watsonx Orchestrate sold separately. And then the prepackaged agents phase 1, which is largely around the allocation agent that was just delivered, and we're going to keep delivering from there. And then the explain cell transaction log, which is slated for this year, but could be bumped into early next year, depending on prioritization and delivery. There's a lot to love about our roadmap, like our PA assistant, the things that we have in market and where we're going with it. I want to thank, before I pass it back to Brian and team, I want to thank them profusely for the time today, and I hope we get to do this again soon. I hope you see how quickly this space is moving. And as we release almost every month each year, there's new things to show. So we hope we can come back to this group and give an update in the near future.
Yeah,
And it,
I mean, you're the best. And I mentioned as I kicked it off that we're passionate about this. No one is more passionate than you about it. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you, my friend.
thank you.
Just great stuff. There is a ton that he unpacked here today. I'll say we are more than happy as an org to grab an hour, when you're ready, for our customers or, when you're ready to come and talk about a consultation about how this tool can better impact you, your data, add value to the current planning analytics system. There's a couple questions I want to get through. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes. So one, Sammy, is around, it's pretty technical, around AI Assistant, how it can help validate the logic inside complex models. For example, if you're tracing a forecast number or was generated, is this something you'd look for AI Assist to do? Is that sort of a bread and butter piece of what AI Assistant would be useful for, or is that kind of not what you think it is?
So just so I understand, the use case is I did a forecast and I'm trying to understand whether the
Validate
model
the
was
logic
updated.
inside a complex model.
Okay, so valid. Okay, yeah. So that's part of what we're doing in the modeling space. I kind of touched on that earlier, as we kind of talked about for the question around the modeling space. So we wanna leverage generative AI next year to do two things. Number one is summarize and generate TI processes, and number two is optimize models, whether that's optimize feeders or optimize rules. And those are things that you should be able to leverage generative AI for using the Planning Analytics Assistant. And where possible, I want to add that where possible, we try to deliver as much as possible into the managed experience. The agentic experience is great, but it's very kind of customized, and we want to make sure that we have a kind of one-stop shop for everything that you should generally be able to do in planning analytics with generative data. You should be able to find with the Planning Analytics Assistant managed experience, and so you should hear more about that, Brian, as we get
Cool.
into next year.
Cool. Follow-up question here. Rick, this is probably a good one for you, sir. It's kind of like boots on the ground. Um, we're talking about a question as we're talking about AI and agentic AI. How does this evolution change the way CFOs and their teams are engaging with planning analytics and the business? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Take
Brian,
that.
I think you led into this as well with the agentic AI, and this shift is really from reactive to more proactive planning. Instead of teams, spending hours chasing data, running manual forecasts, the AI can flag issues, suggest corrective actions, and even trigger workflows automatically. So for CFOs, that just means they can spend more time on strategic decisions. Not, it's the whole old thing, spreadsheet management, right? You're spending more time managing spreadsheet than you are the data. And
Sure.
that's a lot of this is going to just have faster pivots and, make you adjust, with market changes.
Very cool. Let me throw you a softball question. I mean, how do our clients look at ROI then from this assistant? Is it time savings, scenario flexibility? Is it improved forecast accuracy? I mean, is it all the above? Like, what is it that you measure ROI bringing a tool like this in? Like, does it just help with everything, or some things better than others? I mean, what are your thoughts around that? Maybe Sammy, if you want to jump in, or Rick, either.
I mean,
You want to
in
go?
terms
Yeah.
of ROI, it's kind of the old, and Sammy, I'll let you chime in as well, but marketing dollars, it's very similar. What marketing dollars are worthwhile spending and all that. Well, if you don't do this, right, what are you missing out on? What opportunities? And take inventory, right? You make a bunch of products because you have the wrong demand in there. Now you have a bunch of inventory you can't sell or whatever. So there's a lot of um, questions that can be answered by this that in the past were, too difficult, right? That's the reality of it is a lot of this stuff, it's like having a friend sitting next to you, to analyze this data with you. It's amazing.
That takes no PTO and is always working. Sam, is that what you're hearing? Just it's time savings, it's flexibility, improved accuracy, just kind of all the above, Sammy?
Yeah, so I was just gonna Rick kind of hit the nail on the head. To me, it's really two main areas of value. It's missed opportunities and mismanaged productivity. So as Rick mentioned, like take the generative AI can help tease things that might be hidden in the data.
Yeah,
Agentic AI lets you kind of imbue all of that experience with domain knowledge, whether it's specific to your internal organization or the external information that's coming from the market, to make sure that your whatever you're mapping internally is mapped to whatever happening externally, so that the insights that you generate are more in a real world context. And then, as I said previously, we have customers that are using generative AI and agentic AI purely for the kind of the automation of discrete labor tasks. So I showed you a little bit on the HR side. I told you about one of our customers that's automating month-end close. The allocation agent is helping you kind of make allocations as simple and as intuitive as possible with as minimal time spent. So it's really those two. It's missed opportunities because of what the AI can find for you, and mismanaged productivity because what the AI can do for you.
excellent. We're losing people as you're leaving. Please reach out to us. We'd love to grab an hour of your time, an hour with you to just kind of talk about how this works in your organization. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Rick. Thanks for our customers joining and the IBM era and our IBM friends. Appreciate the time. Let's do it again. Thanks so
Thank you.
much.